Ben Wickler, chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. Ben, great to see you. I really needed to talk to you and people like you this weekend because while you understand politics at a state level and a national level, one thing you always tell me is what's going on the ground. Wisconsin is one of three blue wall states. If Kamala Harris wins Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, that's the whole ball game. Tell me what's going on the ground in Wisconsin. The game has tightened a bit.
This is a toss-up election. If you look at the polls, if you look at the models, if you're on the ground, it feels like the wind is at the Democrats' backs. I'm in the Labor Temple in Neenah, Wisconsin. This is not the bluest of blue areas in our state, and yet there were dozens of people here for a 9 a.m. canvass kickoff with our local House candidate, John Zarbano, and Dwayne Chakowski running for state assembly. And what is happening over and over is that people who, in some cases, are canvassing for the first time are going out and finding people who have voted for Trump in the past and are voting for Harris now. We have thousands of volunteers who will be on the ground throughout this weekend. We've knocked on nearly 1 million doors over the last 2 weeks in the state of Wisconsin, and we're going to blow the roof off of our records in these final 4 days. And we don't see an equivalent operation on the Republican side. What we hear about, I just heard another story this morning, is America PAC canvassers, people who were hired by Elon Musk, telling people at the door that they don't care who they vote for, that they personally are going to vote for Harris, but that this is a job for them to go and talk to people about Trump. That's not. We're not voters in the final stretch.
In fact, I was talking to John Ralston the other night in Nevada, and he was saying the same thing. He said, Elon Musk, you may think he's got lots of strengths, but ground game political operations are long. They're efforts that are built over years, if not decades. You've got one in Wisconsin. They had them in Nevada. Elon Musk has not necessarily mastered this particular thing. There's a lot of money that goes into it, but money is not necessarily the thing that builds a ground game.
That's exactly right. You know, I think we're going to see as much activity on the ground from Elon Musk's operation as we are going to see Optimus robots knocking on doors. They're just vaporware at this point. They're not something that people can actually see. I think the Trump campaign has made a strategic mistake. They decided that they would focus on so-called election integrity, which means objecting to legitimate ballots across the country, instead of focusing on making sure that people who support Trump actually get to the polls. And on the Democratic side, we're still doing both persuasion and mobilization. People who want to vote for Harris, who just need that extra nudge, who need a reminder about what ID to bring to the polls when they cast their ballot. That work can make a huge difference at the margin in the final stretch. I give us the edge on the ground game in Wisconsin and every other battleground state that I've heard about.
Okay, so this is important when you talk about ground game. It is not simply making sure that motivated voters come out to vote. It is there's some degree of persuasion still to be had. I was just talking to Keith Ellison about this, and I was talking to Michael Beschloss about it, and I was talking to Bernie Sanders in the last hour. You had a lot of uncommitted voters in Wisconsin in the primary, which you and I both agreed was a remarkable participation in democracy, right? The idea that you go out, you say, I'm involved in the political process, I'm dissatisfied with you. And you and I talked about this months ago, and you said there's work to be done. Has enough work been done that uncommitted voters do not pose a threat to Kamala Harris winning in Wisconsin?
When it's a toss-up election, any factor can make the difference. I think the key thing is what Harris has been saying, and this goes to uncommitted voters. It goes to people who voted for Nikki Haley in the primary. She says, look, you can disagree with me. I will not see you as the enemy. I will give you a seat at the table. She said that last night in Little Chute, Wisconsin, a population 12,000, where we had thousands of people lining up to see her and then roaring in approval. For people that disagree with her about foreign policy, about domestic policy, they know that they will not be treated as the enemy within. They know that she's not going to try to send in U.S. troops to crush dissent. That's what Donald Trump is promising. She will have an administration that listens with respect to different people. She's at every stop. She's voicing her support for a ceasefire, for hostages to go home, for a future resolution with justice and self-determination and peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians alike. And she's saying to Republicans, hey, you may disagree with me about a lot, but we can agree on the U.S. Constitution. Trump wants to terminate it. I want to make sure that we are honoring it. That's a message that builds a big tent, and a big tent is what can win Wisconsin and this whole presidential election.
Ben, good to see you this morning. Thank you for joining us. Ben Wickler is the chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin.